How is it going, everyone? It's Caleb here, and today we are going to be talking about Disney Pixar cars on the Nintendo GameCube. Now, I actually do have some history with this video game. This was one of the first video games I got back in the day when I first got my Xbox 360. I got this game and I played it a decent amount on the Xbox 360, and I've actually been wanting to pick up that version of it again, but I stumbled across the GameCube version first. So I figured, why not pick it up for this system, talk about it here, and then at a later date maybe talk about the 360 version, because I'm sure the 360 version will probably be a decent upgrade from the GameCube version. Now, the game on the GameCube is still a good game, don't get me wrong, but definitely has more technical issues than what I remember with the Xbox 360. But let's go ahead and talk about the premise of this game. First of all, it is based off of the movie of the same name. However, this game actually takes place after Cars 1, so it actually is kind of like a sequel to Cars 1. So that's kind of cool. It has its own original story, and it has a lot of cool races in it. In fact, it has like 19 different races in this game that are all road races. Now, there are actual Piston Cup races as well that are more like NASCAR races, but I definitely enjoy the road races more. I just think they're a lot more fun, and you just have a lot more abilities, and it feels like you have more control over how you're racing in those races compared to the actual Piston Cup races. In the story mode, you of course play as Lightning McQueen, and you have a nice little open world that you can drive around in. And it's on the GameCube, it's split up into a couple different sections. You have the Radiator Springs section, and then there's a couple side areas that you can go to as well and go and explore. There's not a whole lot of stuff to do in the main hub area other than just kind of like drive around. There's some collectibles. There's a postcard collection where a bunch of postcards blow out of Lizzie's house and you need to go find them, and that's one of the collectibles that you have. There's also these little coin things that you can pick up, and they look like little medallions, and when you pick them up they'll give you points that you can use to go buy different paint jobs and different concept art on the main menu, so you'll want to try to find those. You also get points for continuing the story and completing races, and the way that you complete races and start races in this game is you have little markers similar to actually what you see in like GTA 5 online. That's a really weird comparison, but it's the same idea where you see these little markers on the map and you go up to them and then you can enter from the open world into a race. And I actually like the way that's done. I think it's cool to be able to just drive around in this hub world and just go to your races and drive to your races separately. It just adds a little bit more runtime. It also gives you something to do if you just want to drive around and, test out your different paint jobs and stuff in the open world and stuff, or just want to explore the open world. So I still like the idea of the open world, and I think it really works well for this game. The music design for this game is also really good. I love driving around in the hub world and just listening to the music, and even in the races and hearing the music. This game has a very, very good soundtrack to it. Even the main menu music is just really, really good. I love all of it. Now we'll start off talking about the dirt races and how those control, and then we'll go into some of the other races and mini games that you have in this. The actual dirt races themselves, I personally think, are the best part of this game. The cars are pretty easy to drive. They drift pretty well. It takes a bit of time to get used to the drift in this game, I will say, but for the most part, I think that the cars drive pretty well, and I like the way that it feels in the regular races, and I like that over time you get upgrades through the story, and you can get like boosts, and then you can get an even bigger boost bar, so you can boost through the races and just get some more speed and get further apart from your opponents, create more separation between you and them. I like the shortcuts. There's a lot of good shortcuts in this game as well. There's a lot of ramps, and if you ramp and you get big air, it will give you more points that you can go use in the main menu later on. So I like the regular races, and I love the way that they're set out. I think the setup of each track is pretty well done. It does reuse some of the same areas a lot, but it does do it in different configurations, and it doesn't feel like you're doing the same race over and over and over again because of the different configurations that they have. They did a good job of making each configuration feel pretty different from one another. Then you have the NASCAR style races, and these are the Piston Cup Series races. These ones I'm not as big of a fan of. They're not awful, but they're definitely not as enjoyable as the road races. You lose your ability to use the nitro, so you don't have any sort of boost or anything in these races, so they definitely come across as a bit more dull because of that. The racing feels a bit more inconsistent, especially the AI in these versions of the races, because the AI in this style of race it feels like sometimes they'll be really fast, sometimes they'll just slow down a ridiculous amount, sometimes they'll catch up to you, and then once they catch up to you, they'll get in front of you, and then start slowing down again. It just feels very inconsistent with the AI on these races. So that's my biggest problem there. One thing I do like, though, is the pit stop mechanic. After about 6 laps, you'll have to make a pit stop. When the pit stops happens, it will swap to a minigame of you playing as Gyudo, and you have to play as Gyudo and basically do all the stuff that a actual pit crew would do. You have to fix the tires, you have to fill up the gas pump, you have to wipe the windshield down. You basically just are setting up Lightning McQueen to get back on course. And if you do it well enough, it will actually give you a pretty decent score. It actually grades you on how you do it, and it will actually give you a boost in the race, so you can get a little bit ahead of your opponents. Then you have the actual mini games that you can take part in, and the mini games are pretty decent. There's one where you're playing as Luigi and you're just going and you're capturing a bunch of the tires that went missing that he, I guess, got knocked down and rolled away from his shop. So you're going and after all of his tires and you're just trying to pick them up within the time limit. There's another one where you're playing as Mater and you're going cow tipping, or tractor tipping, I guess you could say. That one's pretty fun. I actually do enjoy it. You have to tip all of the tractors within a certain amount of time and also avoid the gigantic Harvester Frank in the map. You have to watch out for him, watch out for spotlights, and just make sure that you don't get caught by him. And it's actually gives you a decent challenge in that one, I think. It actually does a pretty good job of just making some pretty difficult scenarios. And you have to be careful, too, in some areas because you actually have to push these wagons. And you can make bridges using these wagons, but if you push them too soon before you tip over one of the tractors, it will actually fail the mission because you can actually block off the area to the tractor. So you have to be careful doing that. And then my favorite minigame is definitely the one where you're playing as Sheriff. And you are doing high-speed chases and trying to catch all the cars that are speeding on the map. And there's 3 different cars that are speeding in each one. And you have to just tail them long enough to where they finally just give up and you're able to arrest them. And I really like that minigame. It reminds me a lot of the old video games I used to play on the PlayStation 1, like World's Scariest Police Chase and Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. It reminds me of that style of game, so I absolutely love that minigame. That's probably my favorite out of all of them. So overall, I enjoy most of the races and most of the minigames in this game. The one area where this game definitely loses some points, though, is how it performs and how it plays a little bit. So the actual camera controls are pretty off in this game. They just don't feel right almost ever. I feel like a lot of the times in the races, I'm messing with the camera trying to get the camera where I want it because the camera just does not autofocus in a good way in this game. That is a huge problem I had with this game, and it's kind of annoying having to mess with the camera mid-race trying to get it right behind my vehicle. It just seemed like it never wanted to stay right behind my vehicle. It always wanted to get, start leaning a little bit to the left or to the right of my vehicle, and that was really annoying during the races. So it has that issue, and then the GameCube version also has some issues with pop-up. I noticed quite a bit of pop-up on the map, trees popping up in the distance, things like that. And, I can deal with some pop-up. It's not a huge deal, honestly, but on, a GameCube game where you're in the PlayStation 2 generation, the Xbox generation, it's a little bit unusual to see that much pop-up. So I was kind of surprised to see that much pop-up in this game. Another problem is when you go off-road in this game, it starts a countdown sequence for you to get back onto the road. But sometimes, even when you're about to get back onto the road, it will respawn you before the countdown actually ends. So I don't understand why it does that. Give me time to actually get back onto the track instead of just respawning me before the countdown is even done. I don't understand why it does that, and I'm not a huge fan of it doing that. It was just kind of distracting whenever it does that. Another thing that I definitely have to point out, the frame rate in a couple of the minigames. There's a minigame where you're playing as the road hazards, the group of delinquents that basically make Mac fall asleep in the movie and knock Lightning McQueen out of the car. You're playing as them and you're trying to steal Lightning McQueen's equipment and you're doing a heist. And it's a cool sounding mission, but the frame rate really hurts the enjoyability of that mission because it drops down to probably low 20s. And it is not a smooth experience at all. And I wanted to enjoy it so much because I love the delinquents. I love the designs of them. But that was really hard to enjoy when it did that. I saw some people saying that the story mode was pretty short. I really disagree with that. I think the story took me probably around 8 hours to get through. And honestly, you can probably sink even more hours into this game just in the story mode alone. So I really disagree that this is a short game. Honestly, for a movie game and a racing game from this generation, from the GameCube generation, that's not bad. That's actually a pretty decent length. So overall, I mean, I think 6 to 8 hours for a story is pretty darn good for that generation. And that's pretty much all of story mode. But other than story mode, you do have an arcade mode that you can go and play. And the cool thing about arcade mode is the points that you get from the actual story mode, you can take and go spend on the extras menu in the main menu. And you can unlock some extra characters. You can unlock a bunch of different paint jobs for the characters. You can unlock concept art as well. But you can use the different cars and the paint jobs in this extra mode. And you can drive as a bunch of different racers that you couldn't play as in the main story mode. And that's pretty fun. And I do like that. The one thing I don't like is that some of the characters are locked to specific arcade modes. So you can't use every single character that you buy in a road race, and you can't use every single character that you buy in a Piston Cup race. Like, some of them are exclusive to each mode, and I kind of wish that exclusivity wasn't there. I wish it would just let you race as whoever you want. So that was a bit annoying, but not a huge deal. The only other thing I would say is that I kind of wish they would have more cars for you to play as, because for example, in the story mode, you can race as all of the road hazards. You can race as all of the delinquents. But for some reason, you can only race as Wingo in the actual arcade race. And luckily, Wingo is my favorite out of all of the delinquents. But still, I wanted to be able to at least have the choice to race as the other ones. And since you get to play as them in the story, I figured you'd probably be able to play as them in the arcade mode. But for some reason, they don't let you do that. So I feel like it would have been really easy for them to just let you play as all of the cars that you race as in the story, in arcade mode as well. But unfortunately, it just does not let you do that. However, it still gives you a decent selection of racers, and it's cool that you get to change the paint job for them. And it's nice to just be able to jump into arcade mode and play any of the 19 different tracks that you have for the road tracks. I don't really do the NASCAR races because the NASCAR races, I played them for the story, but I don't really have any real reason to go and play them in the arcade mode. I would rather just stick to the road races because that's why I enjoyed the most. But overall, even though this game definitely has its technical issues and it has some head-scratcher moments where you're wondering why did they not just go ahead and add all the characters that you can play as in the campaign to the arcade mode, even though it has some weird issues like that, the game overall is still really good. It looks great. It captures the feeling of cars. The graphics are actually pretty decent for the most part. Didn't have any issues with that. The sound design and the voice acting is really good. And it, like I said, it captures the feeling of cars, and that's what you want. And it is a fun racing game overall, even though it does have some technical issues and the camera can be a little bit wonky. I still think that this is a good game, and it's definitely worth picking up. You can usually find it for $15 or less, and if you can find it for that cheap, pick it up, give it a shot. I think that it's at least worth trying out. And whether you're a Disney fan or a racing fan, I think that you will probably enjoy this game, even with its issues that it has. So go check out Pixar Cars on the GameCube or any of the other systems that it's on, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.